Now, next up is symbol. Now, symbol is my least favourite of all religious language, particularly because sometimes it asks a specific question like they did in 2009, and I would always again be avoiding this particular area. Now, it's associated mainly with Paul Tillich, who was a 20th century theologian and philosopher. He said many different things, but we're trying to sort of boil it down. What he wanted to do firstly was to make a distinction between a sign and a symbol. What he said was that a sign was simply a matter of convention. A sign simply points towards something, it conveys information. So a road sign, for instance, a road sign that says 30, it's simply telling you that in this area you're only allowed to drive at 30 miles an hour. That's all it does, it's a signpost. Whereas a symbol is something more than that. It represents something, it shares in the power of what it points to, according to Tillich. Now, examples of this are both American flag, the Christian cross, Ferrari for that matter. Let's deal with the American flag. So the American flag, whilst it is a sign, it's a sign of America and belonging to America, is also a symbol, and it means different things. And this is part of the strength of symbol, that it can mean different things to different people, but also part of the curse, because how can we be precise? So, it means freedom, it means prosperity, it means the Union, because the Stars and the Stripes was the flag after the Civil War, so trying to combine both the South and the North's flags. Now, for many people, it's also representative of oppression and of greed and of all that is wrong in Western society. So it can mean different things to different people, but it can be very powerful. The idea is that it represents more than it simply points to. What Tillich says, it participates in what it points to, which we'll come back to. Now, in religious terms, let's take the Christian cross. Obviously, this is very symbolic because it represents Christ's death, his suffering, but also his resurrection. But it would be wrong to think that when he's talking about symbolic language, we're talking about objects only, because we're not. All language, according to Tillich, would be symbolic. So, for instance, if we take God is love, we've used God as love in example for analogy and for all the other forms of language, really. What Tillich is saying is that we are using that in a symbolic way. We're not saying, again, literally that God is love. We're not simply having it as a sign, but we're saying that it is symbolic, that it represents more than the literal words. But there is a shared human understanding. Now, he also believed in this idea of affirmation negation, which obviously is very similar to the apophatic way in the via negativa, accompanied with the via positiva. He believed that we would use symbolic language to affirm something, but then we would have to negate it. And we would negate it by recognising that it is in fact a symbol, that it represents our understanding. It is not the literalness. So it deals with both anthropomorphism and limiting God, because it's simply recognising that it is a partial understanding. It's not the complete understanding. Let's talk about the Ferrari and trying to understand this idea of participating in it. You might drive a Ferrari, and this gives you a certain amount of credibility, or it provides maybe disdain from some people, but it represents more than just a car. It tells the world that you are wealthy. Because effectively, anyone that drives a Ferrari needs the head tested for one, but it's expensive. You will never get your money back. You obviously have lots of different money, and it's a status symbol. Symbolic. Let's go back to the criticisms. So Hick had a big issue with this idea of both participation and the very nature of symbol. So when you would take the idea of, say, God is good, he said, well, what's the symbol? Is God the symbol? Are we trying to say that it's symbolic? Is good the symbol? Is that symbolic? Or is the whole proposition symbolic? And they also said, well, what do we actually mean by participation? How can something participate in that which it points to? Sharing in this power. What does it actually mean? How can we be precise? Another criticism comes from Randall. Now, what Randall said is that we need to have a different way of seeing it. Not only is symbolic language and therefore religious language non-cognitive, it is also non-representative. So what he meant by that is that it simply represents humanity as opposed to God. So when we talk about symbols, what we're actually talking about is human culture. and human beliefs as opposed to God. So it's very useful in telling us about what the culture of the day believed, but it is less useful in ultimately adequately describing God, because all we ultimately do is describe our own views.